Hey, we just wanted to give you a heads up. This episode of Us and Them has some colorful language that might not be appropriate for all listeners. In an earlier episode that we called The Changing Face of Heroin, we introduced you to this guy called Steve. He's a recovering addict who's just finished his court-ordered drug rehab program. And like most addicts, whether newly clean or long-term clean, every day is a struggle.
Certain things will trigger me, whether it be locations that I've used at or just hearing about it a lot or seeing it or on TV or whatnot. I feel like to not get cravings, that's not really possible, especially for the first at least couple years of recovery, but it's just how easy they get to control, and it's almost like tearing a muscle. It'll tear and then it'll grow back stronger. So it's every time you say no to a really, really tough craving, it gets easier and easier with every single time you say no. So it's getting easier, but there's definitely times I still crave heroin.
Steve started using opioids in high school, and after graduating, he transitioned to heroin. When we first met Steve, he and his dad had spent the last 6 months driving from Manchester, New Hampshire to Haverhill, Massachusetts for a weekly drug screening and to meet with a therapist. Even though everything was going fine, Steve's dad was wondering what the next 6 months would bring.
Now the true test comes, I guess. Okay, this is something he had to do, whether he wanted to or not. He had to do it or could face charges and maybe some jail time. Now, 6 months down the road again, is he still clean? Now is he back on drugs because the program's over and he don't have to have any piss test weekly or meet anybody weekly? This is the true test, my opinion.
We aired this story in April 2016. We last checked in with Steve about a year ago, just before Christmas. Whereas in previous calls, he sounded healthy, focused, and still on track in staying clean, but this time he sounded even better, in control, proud, excited for his future. I remember feeling excited for him. With all the tragic endings for so many victims of opioid addiction, Steve was going to defy the statistics. Before we got off the phone, he invited us up for a follow-up interview, just to share his progress with you, our listeners. The Changing Face of Heroin has been one of our most downloaded episodes, and we wanted to follow up with some positive coverage to an otherwise bleak national opioid epidemic. But weeks and months came and went, and we were busy with other stories, and it wasn't until this past June 2017 that we were able to reach out again to Steve. When we'd call Steve's cell phone instead of the normal ringtone, you'd hear Vivaldi's Four Seasons before he'd picked up. But when we called in June, it just rang busy. And after checking to see if we had the right number, we tried a few more times, and still just a busy signal. Before we recorded our original interview with him, Steve expressed some concern that his drug addiction might be a shadow on his dad's plumbing business. So we agreed to use a pseudonym for him and his dad. We called him Steve and Frank. But we knew Steve's real name, and reluctantly, we decided to check the obituaries. According to the Manchester Union leader, David DJ Favreau, 22 years old, of Hooksett, New Hampshire, died unexpectedly at his residence on January 31st, 2017. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the podcast that tells stories from America's culture divides. I'm Trey Kay. Dying unexpectedly can mean a lot of things. First and foremost, a tragedy. But at this point, we didn't know for sure if the death was due to an overdose. Reading an obituary published months ago really doesn't blunt the shock and the grief, especially when the victim is so young and when you had such hope for their progress. It's my co-producer, Mitch Hanley, who first told me about DJ Favreau. And he's the one who reported DJ's story for the Changing Face of Heroin episode. After he told me about DJ's passing, I wanted to have him on the podcast to tell us more about this tragic, sad story. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Trey.
So let me remind you of something that you said after we released the Changing Face of Heroin episode. When I asked you about following up with DJ, you told me you were afraid to keep checking in with him. Why'd you say that?
That's true, yeah. I was afraid of getting some tragic news. As I said then, it seemed like every story you hear about someone struggling with an addiction to opioids ends with their dying. And this story turned out to be no exception.
So after you found his obituary, what happened next?
It was early July, and I called up his dad, Dave Sr., and he and his wife, Cheryl, remembered the original interview and agreed to another one. Cheryl said in an email that, maybe this would help us heal. So on a Sunday afternoon, I drove up to Hooksett, New Hampshire.
It's near Manchester, right?
Yeah, just outside of Manchester. I sat down in Dave and Cheryl's kitchen. I asked them what happened since our last interview. As far as they knew, DJ, they called him Deej, had been clean for most of the summer of 16.
He had his nights where he said he had, smoked some pot or had a few beers, smoked some pot. So to say he was 100% clean, I can't say that. But, the signs were definitely not there, like they used to be.
Now, you might ask, why is he using any drugs or alcohol if he's trying to kick his drug habit? Isn't that just going to make it harder?
Well, you're right. I was going to ask you about that. Why?
Yeah, the sense I got from Dave and Cheryl, they said they knew that he was going to do what he wanted to do, and they weren't going to be able to chaperone him everywhere and control what he did. So it seemed to me like they were more concerned with the drugs that might kill him. The fentanyl, the heroin, and later market drugs.
So when we spoke with him in the spring of 2016, he'd completed rehab. So how did the subsequent months go?
Well, this is where it gets a little scary. Dave and Cheryl told me it was late August, and he was driving down in Salem, Massachusetts, and according to an off-duty policeman who was following him, DJ's car was swerving across the lanes, bouncing off guardrails, and he eventually crashed into some boulder, and his car launched like 50 feet into the air. He rolled a few times, and when it finally stopped...
DJ got out of the car, and he dropped. And they had to revive him then with fentanyl.
With fentanyl or Narcan?
Narcan, sorry. But I think he took fentanyl.
That's when he, like you said, as he called it, we always have a relapse here and there. So he had a relapse, and he ended up getting into a car accident, screwed up his back, and stuff like that. So at that point...
I think it scared him.
I think that scared him, and he was doing good again. We had him clean again for a while. He was real optimistic.
But you spoke with DJ in the fall, right?
Yeah, I called him up in October, I think, but he didn't mention any car accident. And I guess, overdosing on fentanyl wasn't something he wanted to tell me about. But he did tell me he wasn't working because of a knee injury.
Yeah, he was horsing around with one of the guys at work who was a little bigger than him, and they were doing a little wrestling thing, trying to put each other down onto the ground, and he just
popped the knee.
I wasn't there on the job when it happened, so I don't know.
So what then happened?
Well, then they called the ambulance, and ambulance came. Then I finally, put there, and yeah, you could see he was in a lot of pain, and his knee was onto the side of his leg and stuff. And I just looked at the guy that was treating him and stuff. I said, "Hey, don't give him any pain medicine. He's a drug addict." Okay, and he gave me the look like, "Thanks a lot, Dad." So.
But when I talked to him on the phone after that, he was proud of that, not using painkillers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. For a while, there was a spell. He was good. As far as we knew, if there was any lapse or anything like that, it was something that we never noticed. So he'd done it discreetly. When he was really on it, he would come home and you could tell he was screwed up.
Yeah, see, his eyes here, you can tell he wasn't high. I could always tell by his eyes. I go, "You're high, aren't you?" "No." I go, "Don't lie to me, Deej." I go, "I used to be on them. I know what your eyes look like." Sure enough, mothers know.
Yeah, they do.
They do.
So I'm confused. Give me a sense of the timing here. This is in the fall after his car accident and after the knee injury?
Yeah, DJ was working with his dad, a plumber, and he had one more year of plumbing school before sitting for his journeyman license. And he was clean. He was motivated.
He was real optimistic about everything. Like you said, you were talking to him around Christmas time, and he was real optimistic about, working for the company and taking over the company someday. And
Yeah, he was very loving. And matter of fact, he spoiled his sisters on Christmas. He had them crying because remember he said this is the first Christmas last year he had money that he didn't use on drugs.
Yeah,
that he could buy us something. He bought me a flag of where I was born, charm, and he bought his sisters each a sister charm, and they were crying when they seen it. And he goes, no, and they says, DG, you didn't have to. He goes, I wanted to. He goes, this is the first time, he goes, I had money, huh?
Yeah. He was all, like I said, all proud and everything.
So it sounds like he was doing really well.
Yeah, exactly.
So what happened?
Well, that Sunday in late January before he died, the family spent the day at Wells Beach up in Maine. They had a great time, but something was bothering DJ. He seemed agitated.
We had a grand time, came home. It was about 5 o'clock. He was very edgy. And he goes, what's the matter? What's the matter? He goes, I gotta go out. Okay. So, DJ came home that night after 9 o'clock. That night, he's sitting on the couch days later there. DJ's eyes were going up in his head. I'm going, oh my God, Dave. I go, his eyes are rolling in his head. He took something. And Dave got up and he went, DJ. And he hit him 3 times to get him out of whatever he took.
Oh, God, this just sounds so scary.
Yeah, it was. The next day, Monday, DJ goes to work with his dad like any day. That evening, he had a big test at plumbing school, which he did pretty well on. He got a 94. And when he got home...
Comes over to me and I'm sitting in that chair and he gives me the biggest hug. He goes, night, Mom. Kisses me. I love you. Goes, thanks for the good supper. I look at him, I'm going, like, you're weird, Walks away. He looks at Dave. He's laying on the couch. He goes, night, Dad. I love you too. Before we went to bed at 10:30, we smelled something funny. He did, coming from his room. We usually always go in his room and check on him before we go to bed. But he didn't want to go in his room and start arguing and fighting. And usually I go up around 11, and I usually go in to see him, but I didn't.
The next morning...
And it was around 6 o'clock, and usually I sat here on the couch, and I call him. And his phone would ring. And he didn't answer. So I'm saying to myself, now I gotta go upstairs and wake him up because he wasn't answering his phone.
So you call him
wherever
he is in the house?
Yeah, he's in his bedroom sleeping, so I would be down here. I pick up my cell phone.
Yelling,
I pick up my cell phone, so I call him up. Then I can kind of hear him, the bed creaking upstairs, rolling over. Hello? I go, come on, time to get up. No, it's like, yes, now, but after he didn't answer, I said, all right, well, I guess I gotta go upstairs. So I went upstairs, opened his door, cracked the door open, it's dark in there, and I'm like, hey, let's go, time to get up. Still no response, and then I turned his light on, and he was crouched down in his bed, and he was already like blackish blue, gray and stuff like that. I started yelling to my wife, oh my God, he's dead. No,
you went, oh my God, he's effing dead.
Just, well, I ain't gonna say the effing word here, but I just, like I said, I started like punching him. I don't know why, but I started punching him to wake up.
No, you were hugging him, going, DJ, why did you do this?
So she called 911, and
that's when
they told me to get him off the bed. So I'm trying to get him off the bed, but he was already like stiff. Rigor mortis started sitting it. I got him off the bed. My brother-in-law helped, and they wanted me to give him mouth to mouth. And it's like, in the meantime, I'm yelling, he's fucking dead. So why?
Everything was like, 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911. 911 I don't know, like a dream, because usually we know when somebody's gray and all puffed up, it's usually they've been gone for a while. But when you're a parent and your kid is in his room, you don't think of these things. You want your child back.
So she goes, well, stop giving chest compressions. The paramedics, lucky they were only across the street, but I was giving him chest compressions, and, I'm just yelling, come on, DJ, wake up. And he didn't.
Yeah, but I remember when I went in the room, who's dead? And you went, DJ's dead. And I went in there. You were hugging him, DJ.
Yeah.
Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me, DJ. Don't do this to me. You were hugging him. That's what I see.
Yeah. So then the paramedics came and they took it, took over.
No, they threw us out of the room and we couldn't see him since.
And then that was it.
And then when he was in his casket, I crawled in it with him.
You crawled in the casket with him.
Of course I did.
Yeah.
He was my baby. I was playing with his hair, and he's telling me to leave him alone. Leave his hair alone. I go, why? He didn't let me touch it when he was alive. It's just, I miss him, and he looked so peaceful. He had his lips open a little bit. He was such a good boy.
We had an open
I
casket.
told Dave, I said, no, I want to bury him like people seeing him in his flannel shirt, his baseball hat, and that's how
Yeah, we
I
didn't
did
put
it.
him in a suit or anything.
I
his
refused
work
to.
clothes,
His
his
work clothes,
flannel
yeah.
shirt, his hat, that everybody, meant.
That hat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it a Cowboys hat or a
No, it's
Penguins
Pittsburgh Penguins. He was
Pittsburgh Penguins.
So I understand a lot of the community came out for DJ's funeral.
Yeah, Cheryl told me that over 200 people turned out to say goodbye. And these were his friends, classmates, teachers, even some town officials.
And I imagine that it was incredibly sad since DJ was so young and everyone thought that he'd turn things around.
Yeah, exactly.
So after a short break, Cheryl and Dave tell us about some of the funnier times with DJ.
He wanted to implement a 1 hour nap time after lunch.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
I have his obituary right here, and it reads, DJ was a talented, kind-hearted, good-natured, and lovable young man. He was a jokester and found great pleasure in picking on his sisters.
Yeah, apparently he had a great sense of humor.
We were sitting one time. He was always a little conscious about, his little weight. Not that he was really a fat kid, but, that was, and we're just driving one time. And he's like, Dad, how I can tell when you're getting fat? I said, how, Dede? He goes, when you hit the bumps, my tits bounce.
Tell me what he wanted to do with the business when he took it over.
He wanted to implement a 1 hour nap time after lunch.
He's not going to have trouble getting people to
I'm
work
like,
for him.
okay, is it a paid nap time or is it unpaid?
What time was the hours?
Lunch would have been 11:30 to 12, and 12 to 1 is company nap time.
I told you he was a prankster.
So, Mitch, how much do you think that Cheryl and Dave replay the events of the night that DJ OD'd?
I think they actually think about it quite a bit, especially Dave. You remember Dave said he smelled something funny outside DJ's room that night?
Yeah.
Well, he ignored it. He just wasn't up for another confrontation with him. I think the reality here is that, trying to be on your guard 24/7 with an addict, it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what? It was like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to really get into a fight. I'm like, so I just kind of because I was tired. I just wanted to go up and go to bed. And I just walked by and blew it off and went to bed.
Every day I wonder, time of death is estimated at 12. What if I would have barged in around 10:30 at night? Would I have been caught him in the middle of doing something? And could I have saved him? Yeah, I got to live with that the rest of my life.
But at the same time, I mean, all day long we avert tragedies that we don't know about because they don't happen,
Yeah.
So you can't take credit for the tragedies that don't happen, but you also can't take responsibilities for the tragedies.
Well, that's what people say. I mean, like you said, even if, we would have barged in and we would have caught him, and so we would have saved him this time, what about the next time?
I was talking to my neighbor across the street this morning, actually, and their son struggles with addiction. And I said to her, it seems to me like an impossible situation when you always have to wonder
If he's going to be alive.
if he's going to be alive, or if you're doing everything that you can to keep them alive. And she said, it's what I do every day. I text him in the morning, "Hi, how are you?" And she waits with bated breath until he replies.
Sounds familiar.
And what also sounds familiar from what you just said is that he has no idea what he's putting her through. That she is constantly on edge. And I just wonder, how do you ever get peace?
You don't.
You don't.
You don't.
One of the issues that we addressed in our Changing Face of Heroin episode is the differences of how to approach this opioid epidemic. I mean, yesterday's law and order tactics have been replaced by treating the drug addiction as a disease. I remember in that car ride that you had with DJ and his dad that they were arguing about which approach was more effective.
Yeah.
I even asked you today, if you did not get arrested, would you be off probation? And you said no. So they need to be arrested. They know they need to be facing jail time.
No,
for
jail
for
time does not fix anything.
Yeah.
No,
I guess
all
we
jail
can,
time do is...
This is for another show, I guess. We could set up another show and argue with the point.
So,
Yeah.
No, all jail time does is it delays the inevitable. All it does
Let me ask you
is...
this, okay? Again, you feared going to jail, and you were also...
I listened to that argument me and DJ had, and it's like, I understand what he's saying. They're the victims. These kids can't help themselves. They go, they get drugged, they get Narcan, they come back, and they do it again. And they know who the repeat offenders are. These kids just can't help it. And it goes back to saying, you overdose, you Narcan, automatically 90 days in jail. After that, a 90-day... I just think that's the answer. I think that's the only answer.
No.
Because these kids aren't gonna go and stop. They can't.
Right,
I learned that after 3 years of dealing with
right.
DJ. They can't stop.
But jail's not going to
You have to force them.
No, you don't.
You have
can't
to force. Yes.
It's almost like you can't force a horse to drink water.
You have.
You can't. You can't force a kid. Nope.
But eventually,
I don't believe in that.
when the horse realizes it's going to die,
So
it
you
will
mean to
drink
tell
water.
me if your son ended up in jail, you would have him in jail with the rapists, the robbers? No, because that's where he would end up.
Okay, let's correct this. Make a facility, a place where it's not so much a prison. I don't know if you just some place these kids have to go to now they got no choice but to be clean for 90 days.
But then what happened with these meetings we went to?
It's not going to help. It's not going to help.
Right,
You
but
have
these
to be
kids
forced.
went to Florida to get out of Manchester from the drug thing for a whole year. They come out 3 days clean and they're back on it.
Got to find
All
something
right?
out. What they're doing now isn't the answer. That's all I'm
No,
saying.
but
they have to be
you know what
harsher
it is?
on them.
All right, we gave our son everything. We got him out of drug deals. We paid the money. We almost lost this house. We were like 2 months behind, and we would give everything just to keep our son alive. And we're not the only ones, because my neighbor across the street went through the same thing with her son, and they found him passed away dead down the road here in Hooksett. Now she threw him out, so now she's living with the guilt. So, see, a lot of parents think that because they can't deal with it, they think that throwing their kids out on the street, that's not doing it the answer either. Because if the kid passes away, now she's living with the guilt that maybe she shouldn't have done that. You know what I'm saying? It's really, really tough.
There's no one right,
There's no
right
one
answer.
right way and there's no wrong
There's
way.
there's no answer.
There's no answer.
But even what they're doing now isn't the answer.
I never got tattoos, never believed in them, and I got this one with a mother and a son with the month he died, which is the carnation, the sweet pea is his birthday.
What does it say?
DJ in loving memory. DJ 4/29/94.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the boy I always wanted because I have 2 beautiful girls.
Dave, is that a new tattoo?
Yeah. It's a cross with a ribbon around it. And it says, until we meet again on the top. Then in the cross, it has DJ. And then in the ribbon, it has in loving memory 4/29/94. And to the day he died, 1/31/2017.
Did you guys have those done at the same time?
Yeah,
Yep.
we had them
Yeah.
done right after he passed away.
Mitch, you showed me some photos that you took of Dave and Cheryl's tattoos. And just so our listeners know, you can see them posted on our website at usandthempodcast.com. So when you spoke with them back in July, it was almost, 6 months after DJ passed?
Yeah, and as you can imagine, it's still really hard. Cheryl says she cries every day, and Dave's not much better.
He has a tough time because he'll listen to his music. Like this morning. Every Sunday he does. And
What is it?
Rap crap. Eminem. You like that type of shit?
It don't matter, he's dope. He knows that, but he's broke. He's so stagnant, he knows.
I got Pandora. I'll put on sometimes when I'm just sitting outside having coffee.
yeah, I come outside and he'll be crying. I wish he would have left a note, something. But like you said, he took everything with him.
Mitch, Dave and Cheryl said DJ seemed to be acting more sentimental than usual before he went up to bed the night he died. I mean, saying that, I love you, Mom, and I love you, Dad, which they thought was unusual for him. And then here you hear Cheryl say that she wishes that he'd left a note. I mean, was there any thought given to the possibility that DJ could have taken his own life?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it is something they'd thought about. But Dave spoke with a guy who used to work for him, somebody actually DJ used to get high with.
I asked him because I just kind of needed to know. And he had spent that Sunday night with him. He had said, no, he said, oh, he was happy, cheery. And he said he, just was in a good mood. He felt like getting high, and stuff. And, he told him that, I don't think I'll ever be 100% clean. He'll always tinker in it. But he said, he wasn't depressed, so he don't think it was suicide or anything like that. He just said just an unfortunate accident. He just got a bad batch or he couldn't take it for being clean. But he said he didn't confide in him in anything. And so they just hung out and had a good time and got high,
Going back to our previous episode, I'm reminded of something that DJ said in the car ride down to Massachusetts about how difficult those cravings were. You asked him if there were any particular triggers for craving heroin.
But not only does anger and feeling down add to a craving or whatnot, but also feeling really good about yourself and feeling really excited gives you cravings too. Because when you're in a good mood like that, you almost look at it like, oh, what would make this better, so there's not one specific mood I would put that gives you cravings or associate a specific mood with cravings, because anything from anger to guilt to depression to excitement to being just extremely happy, every single one of those moods gives me cravings if I'm in the wrong spot or in the wrong mindset at that time.
I mean, wow, that sounds impossible.
Yeah, And one thing I want to point out in this segment, which I'm glad you mentioned, was when DJ says both feeling guilt and extremely happy can cause heroin cravings for him. Cheryl and Dave knew part of what he was struggling with was disappointing them.
That Monday morning, like that, before he died, I said, DJ, I go, don't think you're fooling anyone. I says, I know you were high Sunday. I said, you can sit there and tell me you're blue in the face, you weren't. I says, but I know, and you could tell because he never would argue with me, but he would just smirk. And I know in the past he told me that he never would come out with it or anything like that because he didn't want, to disappoint me, It did hurt him. He wasn't proud to be hurting us. He didn't want to hurt us, but he knew he was hurting us.
Yeah, he knew he was hurting us and it was killing him. But he couldn't help himself.
So was this your last memory of hanging out with DJ's parents, Dave and Cheryl?
No, actually, Cheryl wanted to give me a tour of his room before I left.
Come on, Zena. Zena, come on.
Who's Zena?
Oh, she's the family dog.
Okay, this was DJ's room. Here's his grandpa, him and his grandpa, him and his cousins. He's with Jesus. And this is him, was it 2 weeks before he died, with his sister and his nephews.
That's so happy.
Doesn't he? Yeah. Look at the kids. They loved him. They adored him. And here's DJ. This is what I get to kiss every morning.
Cheryl picked up a large urn from a shelf on the bedside table.
The only thing about DJ's death that I'm at peace with, I don't have to worry about my son coming home anymore, because now I know where he is and I know he can't touch this stuff ever again and nobody can hurt him. It's awful to say, but I miss my kid like hell. But at least I can say I know where he is and he's in peace. This is Christmas time. Now, when you see him like that, would you ever think that he was going to die the following month?
No, not at all.
So what happened? He doesn't even look high. That's him and his cousin. Now, I go to this party every year with DJ and them, and how am I going to deal with that this year? I don't want to go. I told Dave I don't even want Christmas this year.
New Hampshire's medical examiner's office concluded that David DJ Favreau died as a result of ingesting a lethal dose of pure fentanyl. Now, usually at this point in the episode, we'd list a bunch of dire statistics to try to give the opioid crisis some context or extra weight, to tell you what the stakes are. Then we'd tell you about the latest action plan or that the president has declared war on the epidemic. What's being done about it? But for Dave and Cheryl Favreau, none of that matters anymore. This will be the first Favreau Christmas without Deej. And as you've heard, they're not really looking forward to it. After DJ died, condolences came wrapped in the usual sentiments. If you need anything, if there's anything I can do. But the Favreaus only want one thing, and they know they can't get it. What they've said that they hope for, however, is that their story and experiences might help families and their loved ones who are struggling with addiction. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our show was written and produced by me, Trey Kay, and Mitch Hanley. Loretta Williams is the editor. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Kristofi and Mariana Trofimova provide us with images for the web. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From